Hi, friends. Let me ask you something before we even get started today. And I want you to really sit with this question for a moment. I want you to feel it, not just hear it. Have you ever felt lost? Not lost like you forgot where you parked your car. Not lost like you took the wrong exit on the highway. I mean, truly, deeply, terrifyingly lost. Lost inside your own life. Lost inside your own mind. Where you wake up in the morning and the first thought that hits you isn't excitement, isn't gratitude, isn't joy. It's a heavy, suffocating question. What is the point? Why am I here? Is this really all there is? If you've ever felt that way, and I believe most of you in this room have felt exactly that way at some point, I want you to know something right now. Something that I need you to hold on to before I say another word. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not less than. You are simply a human being who is searching. And the fact that you are searching, the fact that something inside you refuses to just go numb, refuses to just accept the emptiness, refuses to just settle, that is not a sign of weakness. That is the bravest thing a human being can do. Today we are going to talk about something that millions of people around the world misunderstand. Millions of people fear, millions of people dismiss without ever truly looking at it. We are going to talk about Buddhism. But I want to be very clear with you from this very first moment. This is not a religious lecture. I am not here to convert you. I am not here to tell you that your faith is wrong, or that your beliefs need to change, or that you need to light incense and shave your head and sit in a cave somewhere. No, what I'm here to do is something far more powerful than that. I am here to introduce you to a way of seeing yourself, a way of understanding your pain, a way of walking through this world that doesn't require you to abandon anything you already believe, but might just give you the tools to finally start to heal. So let me ask you that question again. Do you need to be religious to become a Buddhist? And my answer, my deep, honest, hard-earned answer is this. You don't even need to become a Buddhist. You just need to be willing to wake up. Now let me tell you a story. There was a young man, and when I say young, I mean 23 years old, working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating whatever was cheapest at whatever convenience store was closest to wherever he happened to be at 2 in the morning. This young man had grown up in a household where religion was everything. And I mean everything. Sundays in church, prayers before every meal, Bible verses on the wall. His grandmother could quote scripture the way other people quote sports statistics. And he loved that. He genuinely loved it. He genuinely loved it. There was comfort in it. There was community in it. There was a language in it that made him feel like he belonged somewhere in this vast, confusing universe. But then things started to fall apart. The way things have a habit of doing. His parents divorced when he was 16. His father, the man who used to hold his hand during prayer, left one Tuesday afternoon and didn't come back. His mother, who had been the anchor of the family, slowly started disappearing into a bottle. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in movies, slowly, quietly, like the tide going out. 1 glass of wine at dinner becoming 2, 2 becoming a whole bottle becoming something she needed before she could even get out of bed in the morning. And this young man, who had been told his whole life that God had a plan, who had been told that faith could move mountains, started to wonder, sitting on the floor of a bathroom at 3 in the morning, holding his mother's hair back while she was sick. He started to wonder what kind of plan this was, what kind of God allowed this, what kind of faith was supposed to make sense of this kind of pain. He didn't stop believing. He just stopped knowing what to believe. And maybe some of you know exactly what that feels like. That space between, that terrifying in-between place where your old beliefs no longer fit and your new ones haven't arrived yet. That is one of the loneliest places a human being can occupy. So this young man kept working, kept surviving, got himself through college somehow, graduated, got a job that was supposed to be the beginning of everything. And it was fine. It was fine. It was perfectly numbingly fine. He had an apartment. He had a salary. He had a gym membership he never used and a Netflix subscription he fell asleep watching every night. And he was miserable. Not dramatically miserable. Not crying in the rain miserable. Just quietly, persistently, bone deep unhappy. The kind of unhappy that you can smile through. The kind of unhappy that you can hide at parties. The kind of unhappy that is so ordinary, so common, so accepted as just part of adult life that nobody around you even notices it. One day, because he had nothing else to do on a Saturday afternoon, because he had already cleaned his apartment twice and reorganized his closet for the third time that week, he walked into a bookstore and he picked up a small, thin, unassuming book. He didn't pick it up because of the title. He picked it up because it was in the sale bin and he had exactly $7 in his pocket. The book was about Buddhism, about the basic teachings, about something called the Four Noble Truths. He almost put it back. He thought, I'm not Buddhist. I wasn't raised Buddhist. Buddhist? This isn't for me. But something, call it intuition, call it fate, call it the universe having a sense of humor. Something made him take it to the register. He paid his $7. He took it home and he read the first page. And the first page said this: life involves suffering. That's it. That was the first thing this ancient teaching had to say. Not a promise of paradise, not a guarantee of reward, not a command or a prohibition. Just a simple, honest, almost brutally plain statement. Life involves suffering. And this young man, who had been taught to pray his way through pain, to believe his way around difficulty, to have faith that things would get better. This young man sat in his apartment on a Saturday afternoon and for the first time in years felt something crack open inside his chest. Not break. Crack open, like light coming through a wall, because someone had finally told him the truth. That young man was me, and what I found in that thin $7 book changed the entire trajectory of my life. Not because I became Buddhist, not because I renounced my faith or abandoned everything I had been raised to believe, but because I found something in those ancient teachings that I had never found anywhere else. I found permission, permission to be honest about my pain, permission to stop pretending that everything was fine, permission to look directly at my suffering instead of always trying to look away from it. And today, I want to give you that same permission. Because here is what I have come to understand after years of study, years of practice, years of sitting with these ideas and watching them transform not just my own life, but the lives of hundreds of people I have had the privilege to speak with and work with and walk alongside. Buddhism is not fundamentally a religion. Or rather, let me say it more carefully, because I want to be precise here. Buddhism can be a religion, yes. For millions of people around the world, it is very much a religion, complete with rituals and deities and temples and traditions that go back thousands of years, and I have deep respect for all of that. But at its absolute core, stripped down to its most essential, most radical, most revolutionary foundation, Buddhism is a psychology. It is a system for understanding the human mind. It is a practical, evidence-based, supremely compassionate guide to the one thing every single human being on this planet, regardless of race, regardless of culture, regardless of language or history or belief, every single one of us is trying to figure out, how do I stop suffering so much? How do I find some peace in this life? How do I actually be okay? And the remarkable thing, the thing that stopped me cold on page 1 of that book, is that the Buddha didn't start with Buddha, didn't start with God. He didn't start with scripture. He didn't start with rules or commandments or divine authority. He started with an observation, a simple, scientific, painfully accurate observation about the human condition. Life involves suffering, dukkha. That's the Pali word. And it's one of the most important words you will ever learn. Because once you truly understand what it means, you will never see yourself or your life the same way again. Dukkha doesn't just mean suffering in the dramatic sense. It doesn't just mean grief and loss and catastrophe. It means something much more pervasive, much more subtle than that. It means unsatisfactoriness. It means the feeling that something is slightly off. The feeling that even when things are good, there's this low hum of anxiety underneath. The feeling that even your happiest moments are touched by a kind of fragility because you know they won't last. The feeling that you are always wanting just a little bit more than you have. Sound familiar? Of course it does. Because you are a human being living in the 21st century and you are surrounded, absolutely surrounded, by messages telling you that you are not enough. Your body is not right. Your career is not impressive enough. Your relationship is not romantic enough. Your life is not exciting enough. Your life is not exciting enough. Your Instagram is not curated enough. You need to buy this, achieve that. Become this version of yourself, reach that level, hit those numbers. And the moment you do, the moment you finally get the thing you thought you wanted, there's about 48 hours of satisfaction, and then the hunger comes back. Just a little bigger this time, just a little more insistent. That is dukkha. That is what the Buddha was pointing at 2500 years ago. Not the dramatic suffering of tragedy, but the ordinary, grinding, persistent suffering of being a mind that can never quite be satisfied, of being a self that is always, always grasping for something it doesn't have. And here is where it gets extraordinary. Here is where the Buddha did something that no one else in recorded history had done quite the same way. He didn't just diagnose the problem. He went looking for the cause. Why do we suffer? Why do we suffer? What is actually happening when we experience this relentless, nagging, never quite satisfied feeling? And what he found, sitting under a tree in northern India in deep meditation after years of seeking, what he found was at once the most simple and the most radical insight in the history of human thought. We suffer because we cling. We suffer because we resist. We suffer because we are in constant battle with reality. We want things to be different than they are. We want people to be different than they are. We want ourselves to be different than we are. And that gap, that painful, exhausting, constant gap between what is and what we want to be, that gap is where our suffering lives. Now, I want you to pause with me for a moment here. I want you to actually think about your own life. Think about the thing that causes you the most pain right now. Maybe it's a relationship that isn't working. Maybe it's a job that drains you. Maybe it's your financial situation. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's something you did years ago that you still haven't forgiven yourself for. Whatever it is, I want you to sit with it for just a second. Now ask yourself this question. How much of my pain comes from the situation itself, and how much comes from my refusal to accept that this is the situation? Think about that. Really think about it. Because in my experience, in the lives of the people I have sat with and listened to, the answer is almost always the same. A significant portion of our suffering, not all of it. I want to be clear, not all of it. But a significant, enormous portion of it comes not from what is happening to us, but from our war with what is happening to us. Our insistence that it should not be this way. Our endless, exhausting, painful argument with reality. And Buddhism, not as a religion, but as a practice, as a philosophy, as a way of training the mind. Buddhism says, what if you stopped fighting? What if just for a moment, you put down your weapons and look directly at what is actually here? Now I can already hear some of you. I can feel the resistance in the room. And I understand it because I felt it too. I thought, acceptance sounds like giving up. It sounds like weakness. It sounds like you're telling me to just roll over and take it. If I accept my suffering, doesn't that mean I'm okay with it? Doesn't that mean I stop trying to change things? And the answer, the beautiful, liberating, counterintuitive answer, is no, absolutely not. Acceptance in the Buddhist sense does not mean passive resignation. It does not mean you stop working to improve your life or fight for justice or protect yourself or pursue your dreams. What it means, and this took me a long time to truly understand, what it means is that you stop wasting your energy fighting the reality of what is already true. You stop spending your precious, limited, irreplaceable life force in a war against what has already happened. You grieve it fully. You acknowledge it completely. You look at it without flinching. And then, only then, from that place of clear-eyed honesty, you decide what to do next. There is a story, and this is one of my absolute favorite stories in all of Buddhist teaching, about a monk who was walking through a forest when he was shot by an arrow. He fell to the ground, bleeding in tremendous pain. His disciples rushed to him and asked, "Who shot you? What kind of bow was used? What kind of arrow? What direction did the attacker come from? What were their intentions?" And the monk said, "None of that matters right now. What matters right now is getting this arrow out." That story is about all of us. Every single day we are walking around with arrows in us. Old wounds, old stories, old betrayals, old failures, old moments of shame. And instead of focusing on getting the arrows out, instead of addressing the actual wound, we spend our energy analyzing who shot us, why they shot us, what kind of bow they used, whether the arrow was fair, whether we deserved it, whether anyone will ever be held accountable. And meanwhile, we keep bleeding. Buddhism says, get the arrow out first. Address what is actually happening in your life right now. Deal with your actual pain. And you don't need to be religious to do that. You just need to be honest. Let me tell you about a woman I met some years ago. I will call her Sarah, because that is not her name, but her story deserves to be told. Sarah had grown up in a deeply devout Muslim family, and her faith was one of the most important things in her life. She prayed 5 times a day. She fasted during Ramadan. She was a genuinely, sincerely, beautifully faithful person. But Sarah was also battling severe anxiety. The kind of anxiety that made it hard to leave her house some days. The kind of anxiety that would wake her at 3 in the morning with a racing heart and a mind full of catastrophic thoughts about things that hadn't happened and might never happen. She went to her Imam, and he gave her the counsel that his tradition provided, and she appreciated it, and it helped somewhat. But the anxiety remained. A friend suggested she try mindfulness meditation, and Sarah almost didn't go because she had been told by some people in her community that meditation was Buddhist and therefore not compatible with her faith. She almost let that stop her. But something, that same brave, searching, restless something that lives in all of us when we are desperate enough to look anywhere for relief, something made her go. And what she found there was not Buddhism replacing her Islam. What she found was a set of mental tools, ancient, simple, elegant tools that helped her understand what was happening in her own mind. She learned to observe her thoughts without immediately becoming them. She learned to notice the anxiety rising like a wave without immediately being swept away by it. She learned that thoughts are not facts, that the terrifying story her mind told at 3 in the morning was not a prophecy. It was just a thought, a pattern, a habit of mind that could be changed. She told me that after 6 months of practice, she could finally sit in the stillness of her own prayer without her mind running in 17 directions at once. She said that mindfulness had made her a better Muslim, because now when she prayed, she was actually there, present, still, open, more. That is what I want you to hear. That is the heart of what I am trying to say today. These teachings, these ancient, practical, universal insights about the nature of the mind and the nature of suffering, they do not belong to any religion. They belong to humanity. They are about the human mind. And your human mind is not Buddhist or Christian or Muslim or Hindu or atheist. Your human mind is simply, profoundly, beautifully, sometimes agonizingly human. And it needs the same things that every human mind has always needed: clarity, compassion, peace. Now, let me talk about something that I think is the most radical concept in all of Buddhist teaching. The concept that, when you truly understand it, will either terrify you or liberate you, and sometimes both at the same time. It is the concept of anatta, no self. The idea that what you call I, that fixed, solid, permanent self that you carry around and defend and worry about and protect, that self does not exist in the way you think it does. Now wait. Before you throw something at me, hear me out. This is not nihilism. This is not a claim that you don't exist. It is not a claim that you don't matter. It is something far more subtle and far more interesting than that. What Buddhism is pointing at is this: everything you call yourself is actually a process, a constantly changing, flowing, evolving process. The person you are today is not who you were 10 years ago. The beliefs you hold now are not the beliefs you held as a child. The body you live in is constantly replacing itself at the cellular level. The emotions you experience rise and fall like weather. Even your thoughts, those things that feel so personal, so essentially you, your thoughts are not you. They arise, they pass, they change. They are as impermanent as clouds. And here is why this matters. Here is why this is not depressing, but actually one of the most liberating things you will ever hear. If the self is not fixed, if it is not a solid, permanent, unchangeable thing, then you are not stuck. You are not trapped inside the story you tell about yourself. You are not sentenced to be the person your past made you. You are not forever defined by your worst moment. You are not forever limited by your worst fear. You are a process, and processes can change. I think about this all the time when I hear people say, and I hear it so often in so many forms. I think about it when someone says to me, I can't change. This is just who I am. I hear that and I want to take them gently by the shoulders and say, who told you that? Who made you believe that? Because the science disagrees. The neuroscience, the psychology, the entire field of what we now call neuroplasticity, It all says the same thing the Buddha said 2,500 years ago. The mind is not fixed. The mind is trainable. The brain can change. You can change. Not easily, not without effort, not without some grief for the old patterns you're leaving behind. But genuinely, fundamentally, profoundly, you can change. I think about a man I will call Marcus. A man who, by the age of 35, had been through 2 failed marriages, had alienated most of his closest friends, had lost a job he loved because of his anger, and was living in a studio apartment with a futon and a takeout menu collection, and a level of bitterness that had become its own kind of companion to him. Bitterness can do that, you know. It can become your identity. It can become so familiar, so constant, so woven into the fabric of your daily experience that you start to mistake it for personality. Marcus came to a meditation retreat not because he believed in it, but because his therapist had suggested it and he had run out of other ideas. He arrived skeptical, defensive, ready to be disappointed. He sat in the first meditation session with his arms crossed and his jaw set and his mind producing a running commentary about how this was all nonsense and he was wasting his time and he could be watching football right now. And then something happened. The teacher leading the retreat said something that hit Marcus like a physical impact. She said, "The person you've been is not the person you have to be. The habits of mind you've developed are not your destiny. They are just habits, and habits can be changed." She wasn't saying it directly to Marcus. She was saying it to everyone in the room. But Marcus told me later that it felt like she was looking right at him, like she was reading something he hadn't even admitted to himself. Because what Marcus had never in all his years of therapy, in all his years of trying and failing and trying again, what he had never truly admitted was this: he didn't believe he could change. Even somewhere deep down, underneath all the defenses and bitterness and the excuses, there was a belief, a cold, hard, immovable belief, that this was just who he was. Angry, difficult, unlovable, destined to push people. And Buddhism, not the religion, but the practice, the simple, daily, unglamorous practice of sitting with your own mind, Buddhism cracked that belief open. Not all at once, not dramatically, over months of practice. Over the slow, painful, genuinely difficult work of learning to observe his own anger without immediately feeding it, of learning to notice the moment, that specific, brief, often missed moment between the trigger and the reaction, of learning that in that moment, however small, however brief, there is a choice. Marcus today, and I have stayed in touch with him, and I want to be honest, his life is still not easy. Life is never just easy, but Marcus today has relationships in his life that actually work. Not perfectly, but genuinely. He has friendships that have lasted years. He has a relationship with his daughter who had stopped speaking to him that has been slowly, painfully, beautifully rebuilt. He told me recently that the thing he practices every single day is not any kind of religious ritual. It is simply this: he pauses, he breathes, he notices what is happening in his own body and his own mind before he speaks or acts. That is it. That is the entire practice, and it changed his life. Now some of you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds good in theory, but you keep saying practice. What does that actually mean? What does it look like? Because I am not about to move into a monastery. I have a job, I have kids, I have a commute, I have a mortgage, I have 1,000 things demanding my attention every day. Where does Buddhist practice fit into any of that? And this is one of the most beautiful things about these teachings. One of the things that makes them genuinely universal. You do not need a monastery. You do not need a monastery. You do not need special robes or even a meditation cushion, though a cushion is nice. What you need, the only thing you actually need to begin, is 5 minutes of honesty with yourself. That's it. 5 minutes. In the morning before the day has claimed you. Before the phone has captured your attention. Before the noise begins. 5 minutes of sitting. You can sit on a chair, you can sit on the floor, you can sit on the edge of your bed. 5 minutes of closing your eyes and asking yourself, what is actually here right now? What am I actually feeling? What is my mind actually doing? Not to fix it. Not to fix it. Not to change it immediately. Not to judge it. Just to see it. Just to be honest. Just to say, okay, this is where I am right now. This is what is actually happening in me. Because here is the thing, and this is something I have seen over and over again in my own life. And in the lives of people I have worked with, the moment you truly see something clearly, it begins to lose some of its power over you. The thoughts that terrify you in the dark are somehow less terrifying when you turn on the light. The feelings you have been running from are somehow less overwhelming when you stop running and turn to face them. Not because they disappear, they don't always disappear, but because you discover, to your own profound surprise, that you can actually bear them, that the feelings you thought would destroy you, you can actually sit with, that the darkness you thought would swallow you, you can actually see through. The Buddha had a word for this quality of attention: mindfulness, sati in Pali. And it is one of those words that has been somewhat diluted in the modern world, reduced to a buzzword on wellness apps and yoga studio posters. But its original meaning is something much more powerful than that. It means, quite literally, to remember. To remember to be present. To remember in the middle of your very ordinary, very complicated, very distracted human life. To actually be here. To actually notice what is happening, to not be carried away by the automatic, unconscious, habitual running of your own mind, but to be, just for a moment, and then another moment, and then another, genuinely, fully, honestly awake. And I want to tell you something about what happens when you start to practice this. Because I know it sounds almost too simple, too quiet, too small. In a world that rewards hustle and noise and achievement and productivity, sitting quietly with your own mind for 5 minutes sounds almost embarrassingly modest. But I want to tell you what happens, because the results are anything but small. When you begin to actually pay attention to your own mind, when you start to notice the patterns, the habits, the automatic reactions, the stories you tell yourself over and over without even realizing you're telling them, when you start to see all of that clearly, something begins to shift. Oh, and the shift is not dramatic at first. It is subtle, like the very first light before dawn. You won't even be sure it's happening some days, but it is. It absolutely is. You start to notice the moment of reaction before you have already reacted. And then slowly, imperfectly, non-linearly, sometimes frustratingly slowly, you start to make different choices, not because you forced yourself, not because you white-knuckled your way into being a better person, but because you can see more clearly, because you have begun to understand your own mind. And that clarity, that growing, deepening, honestly hard-won clarity, that is freedom. That is what Buddhism is ultimately pointing toward. Not enlightenment as some exotic, mystical, out-of-body experience available only to monks on mountaintops, but the everyday ordinary, available to all of us freedom of a mind that is not enslaved to its own automatic patterns. Let me talk about compassion. Because if mindfulness is the foundation of Buddhist practice, compassion is the heart of it. And I think compassion might be the single most misunderstood and undervalued capacity in modern life. We live in a world that has become very good at performance and very poor at presence. We have learned to broadcast our lives and forgotten how to actually live them. Life journey. We have learned to present our best selves and forgotten how to be with our actual selves. And one of the casualties of all that performance is genuine compassion. Not the social media kind, not the hashtag kind, not the performative kind, but the real, quiet, costly, deeply human kind. The kind that actually stays. The kind that looks at someone's pain without needing them to be okay. The kind that looks at your own pain without needing to immediately fix it. Buddhism teaches something called metta, loving kindness. And it is practiced, actually practiced as a meditation, as a deliberate cultivation, in the most honest way I have ever encountered. You begin not with the world, not with your enemies, not even with the people you love most. You begin with yourself. You sit down and you direct kindness toward yourself. You offer yourself the words and you say them internally, slowly, actually meaning them, or at least trying to mean them, even when they feel impossible. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease. And for many people, that is the hardest meditation there is. Because we are so much easier on strangers than we are on ourselves. We are so much quicker to forgive other people's failures than our own. We are so much more patient with other people's struggles than we are with our struggles, And Buddhism says that has to change. Not because you should feel good about everything you've done. Not because accountability doesn't matter. But because you cannot pour from an empty vessel, because you cannot offer genuine compassion to the world from a place of self-hatred, because the war you are waging against yourself, the relentless internal criticism, the perfectionism, the shame, that war is making you sick. And it is also making it impossible for you to truly, deeply, generously love other people. I have to tell you about a teacher I once had. An older woman, not a Buddhist monk, not even someone who would have described herself as particularly spiritual. She was a community nurse. 40 years of working in some of the most difficult stances imaginable. Poverty, addiction, violence, loss. She had sat with more dying people than she could count. She had held more hands in more dark rooms than anyone should ever have to. And one day I just asked her directly, because I needed to know. I asked her, how do you keep caring? After everything you have seen, after all of it, how do you keep showing up with your heart open? And she was quiet for a moment. And then she said, I had a patient once, a man who was dying. He had lived a hard life, made a lot of mistakes, done some things he wasn't proud of, hung off. He was terrified at the end, not of dying exactly, but of dying unforgiven. Not forgiven by anyone else, forgiven by himself. She paused. I sat with him for a long time, and eventually he got there. And in those last few days, something in him just relaxed. Something that had been clenched his entire life just let go. And he died peacefully. She looked at me. I keep caring because I keep seeing that. I keep seeing that it is never too late to let go. It is never too late to be kind to yourself. And if it is not too late for someone who is dying, it is surely not too late for someone who is still living. That is what compassion means at its deepest level. And that choice, made again and again, imperfect and inconsistent, and sometimes barely recognizable as progress, that choice, over time, changes everything. I want to tell you about impermanence now. Because Anika, the teaching on impermanence, is the one that, in my experience, has the most immediate, practical, transformative power of all the Buddhist teachings. And it is also the one that we, as modern human beings, work hardest to avoid.